The first steps you take onto the streets of Victorian London bring you into the immediate embrace of the cold. It's the kind of cold that doesn't simply chill the skin. It feels as though it reaches into the bones, settling into the deepest part of your being. London, under the weight of winter's grasp, is a city transformed. The once bustling streets are now quieter, the sounds muffled by the thick fog that seems to hang in the air like an oppressive blanket. The mist wraps itself around every building, leaving only faint shadows and the eerie outline of structures obscured by the thick white clouds. Visibility is poor, and the cold seems to seep into everything, making the world feel a bit distant, a bit unreachable. You walk through the streets, feeling each step grow heavier as the biting air pushes against your face. The frost clings to the windows of the narrow shops lining the roads, and the scent of burning wood and coal rises from chimneys, the only sign of warmth in a world frozen still. The sound of footsteps is softened by the layer of snow that now blankets the ground. Everything around you seems to slow down as the world holds its breath, waiting for the worst to pass. You pull your coat tighter around you, its fabric barely enough to protect against the cold that cuts through your layers. You pass by the homes of the wealthy, their windows glowing warmly with light and fire, hearths burning brightly within. But even the wealthier districts feel the sting of the cold, the frost creeping in around the edges, despite their grand heating systems. Imagine the contrast you now feel as you turn the corner and find yourself in the poorer districts of the city. Here, the winter's cruelty is felt more deeply as the poor battle not just the cold, but the chill of neglect and exploitation. In these parts of the city, the air is even colder, carrying with it the scent of dampness and mold, where homes are poorly insulated and families struggle to keep the fire burning long enough to get through the night. Here, the poor huddle together under threadbare blankets, shivering as they listen to the wind howl through the cracks in their walls. The old and sick are particularly vulnerable, their frailty accentuated by the harshness of the season. Imagine children running through the streets, their faces flushed red from the cold, but their eyes filled with a strange mix of excitement and resignation, for they know no other life. They make do with what they have, crafting makeshift toys out of whatever they can find. But they never fully escape the biting winds. As you continue walking through the narrow alleys, you catch glimpses of the workhouses, grim buildings with their large iron doors that open only to admit the desperate, the poor, too cold to stay outside, but unable to find the warmth of the hearth, crowd in, seeking shelter as they prepare for another night of unbearable exposure. The air inside is thick with the stench of sweat, damp wool, and bodies huddled too close for comfort. You can feel their miseries palpable, like the cold itself is something that refuses to be shaken, a constant companion, never leaving them in peace. The fog grows thicker as the day progresses, and the visibility becomes nearly non-existent. The rich have their private carriages to carry them safely through this dismal world, but for those who must walk, it is a dangerous and uncertain journey. The streets become a maze of shadows and, not just because of the fog, gas lamps line the streets, their flames flickering weakly, providing little comfort against the unrelenting cold. Their light, soft and uneven, does little to pierce the darkness and the chill that have settled in every corner of London. You see the match girls, their small, delicate hands frozen from striking match after match in an effort to light them long enough to sell. The cold has made their task nearly impossible, and they huddle together in the alleys for warmth, their faces pinched in pain from the frostbite that creeps in at the edges of their small fingers. The poor girl, with her hand outstretched, offering her matches to anyone who will buy them, is a portrait of desperation. Her eyes dart back and forth, hoping to catch someone's attention. But those who pass her by are often too preoccupied with their own survival to notice her plight. As you pass through these streets, you feel the weight of their hopelessness and the quiet suffering that so many endure simply to survive. The rich, hidden behind their warm walls, are insulated from this misery. They carry on with their luxurious winter activities, ice skating at private rinks or indulging in lavish balls, while the poor, without the privilege of a comfortable home, endure the extreme cold with no relief. The divide between these two worlds could not be more stark. In one world, the rich are untouched by the freezing winds and the endless snow, while in the other, the poor battle daily just to survive. As the cold deepens, you feel the stark contrast between the rich and poor become even more apparent. The streets, which once seemed filled with bustling life, are now mostly deserted, except for the poor souls who have no choice but to brave the cold. Their lives are a daily struggle for survival as they face an unforgiving and relentless winter, the absence of proper shelter, and the constant battle for resources that make these harsh conditions even worse. Imagine walking along the frosted streets, where the ground beneath you is slick with ice, and the sound of footsteps becomes almost muted under the thick layer of snow. There is no escape from the cold, no respite, and no place to hide from its bite. You pass narrow alleyways where groups of people huddle together, hoping to share their meager warmth. Children in ragged clothes move among the crowd, offering handmade items for sale, small trinkets or newspapers. Their frozen hands tremble as they try to make a living in these cruel conditions. In the distance, you see a match girl, her tiny face streaked with cold and exhaustion. She holds up a bundle of matches, hoping someone will buy a single stick, just enough to make a little money to buy a meal. Her small body is shaking from the cold, and her feet are barely covered with rags. You can see how the brutality of winter wears on her. Her eyes are heavy with fatigue, but there's a quiet resolve in her that refuses to give up. The silent strength of these children, who are forced to grow up so quickly, resonates deeply within you. Their determination to survive, despite the odds, feels like a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The workhouses, the last refuge for many, are crowded with people seeking warmth and a meal. As you step inside one of these grim buildings, you are hit by the musty, damp smell of the place. The air is thick with sweat, exhaustion, and the sound of shuffling feet. You can hear the constant coughing of the sick, their weakened bodies unable to fight off the harsh conditions. The rooms are filled with rows of beds, some occupied by the elderly and sick, others by those too weak to even stand. There is a sense of helplessness in the air, a quiet suffering that is both visible and invisible at once. These people, the poor, the sick, the homeless, are forced to endure, day after day, the brutality of a winter that never seems to relent. The gruel they are given for sustenance is not enough to sustain them, and they are left vulnerable to every illness that passes through the overcrowded workhouses. The rich, meanwhile, remain oblivious to the plight of the poor, insulated in their homes with their private heating systems and grand fireplaces. They walk through the streets, untouched by the harsh winds, attending their grand parties, while the poor struggle to stay alive in the streets. As you pass through this world, you can't help but feel the weight of the divide between the classes. The luxury of the wealthy is in stark contrast to the grinding poverty that defines the lives of the working class. The rich are protected from the cold, shielded from the suffering, while the poor face the brutal winter head-on with only their will to survive. You begin to notice how the poor people, their faces red from the wind, their clothes thin and worn, are forced to be resourceful in the harshest ways. They share spaces, their lives interconnected through the shared need to survive, and in those shared spaces, they find a kind of unity, a community, in the midst of their hardship. The match girls are not the only ones suffering. There are the elderly women in the streets, the disabled, and those too ill to fend for themselves. The cold is not just an inconvenience for them. It is a silent killer. It creeps into their bones, making the simplest tasks like walking or gathering wood impossible. You watch as one elderly woman, bundled in layers of thin fabric, moves slowly along the street, leaning on her walking stick. Every step seems to take her longer and longer, and you wonder how long she will be able to survive in this unforgiving world. And yet, despite the harshness, there is something beautiful in the way these people endure. Their resilience is quiet, but it is present in every breath they take, in every step they make forward. No matter how painful, their survival is not a victory over the cold. It is simply survival itself, a testament to their strength, to their ability to carry on in the face of overwhelming adversity. The rich, as they pass in their carriages, may never see the true cost of winter, the cost of lives, of human endurance, of suffering. But you, walking among the poor, see it, all the struggle, the hope, and the quiet fight for survival. As you walk deeper into the heart of Victorian London, the contrasts become even more pronounced. The city, buried under a blanket of snow, seems to divide itself into two worlds, one of luxury and warmth, the other of struggle and cold. It's almost as if the winter itself has divided the city, creating an invisible boundary between the lives of the wealthy elite and the impoverished masses. The rich, cloistered in their grand homes, are seemingly untouched by the fury of the winter. The snow may fall, but they see it through pristine windows, from the comfort of their lavish parlors, where the crackling warmth of fireplaces provides a stark contrast to the chill outside. Imagine the pleasure of attending a private ice skating event on a manicured lake, dressed in fine clothes, their boots sleek as they glide effortlessly across the ice. The wealthy elite seem to exist in a separate reality, a warm cocoon wrapped in luxury and comfort, far removed from the hardships faced by the working class. But as you leave the grand homes and venture down the narrow cobbled streets, the scene changes. You enter the slums of the city, where the true cost of the winter becomes painfully evident. The people here are bundled in rags, struggling to stay warm as the wind bites through their clothes and the snow piles up around them. They huddle in doorways, under awnings, or in poorly constructed hovels, desperate for any kind of shelter or heat. The streets are alive with the sounds of struggle, the cries of children too cold to play, the shuffling of feet as families search for food or warmth. In these streets, you can see the stark reality of what it means to live during a winter in Victorian London as a working-class citizen. For the rich, the snow is a charming accessory, adding to the romantic appeal of the season. But for the poor, the snow is a barrier to survival, making even the simplest tasks like buying food, collecting firewood, or getting to work feel impossible. You watch as peddlers struggle to move their carts, the wheels of which are stuck. In the snow, their frozen fingers desperately trying to clear the path. You can hear the frustration in their voices, the tiredness in their eyes, as they continue their laborious work day after day. Despite the cold that seeps into their very bones, the workhouses, the only refuge for the poorest, are a place of last resort. As you approach one of these grim buildings, the air inside is heavy with the stench of sweat, dust, and damp wool. The poor are crammed into overcrowded rooms, trying to sleep as best they can on straw mats. There's no space for privacy, no comfort to be found. The cold seeps into the walls, and the air is so thick with the sickness that has taken root in the overcrowded conditions that it feels like the very building is alive, groaning under the weight of its human cargo. You see the weak and frail huddled together in corners, wrapped in the same thin blankets, trying to conserve what little warmth they can find. The wealthy, however, remain largely unaware of these conditions, while they attend fancy winter balls. With golden chandeliers and endless servings of warm food, the poor are fighting a quiet battle just to stay alive. The contrast is almost suffocating for the rich. Winter is a season of indulgence, a time to show off their wealth, while for the poor, it's a constant battle to survive the next cold night. You feel this divide keenly as you walk through the frosted streets. The snow becomes more than just a part of the environment. It becomes a symbol of the division between the classes. The wealthy elite glide smoothly through the snow in carriages, their servants ensuring they stay warm. Meanwhile, the poor struggle to survive, their every breath visible in the frigid air. The snow, beautiful and serene in the distance, becomes a constant reminder of the disparities that run deep through the fabric of society. Every flake that falls, every icy gust of wind, highlights the harsh realities that those on the bottom of the social ladder must endure. As you reflect on this disparity, you can't help but feel the frustration of the poor trapped in a system that offers them no warmth, no reprieve, and no hope. The privilege of the rich is a constant reminder of the powerlessness of the working class, who, despite their struggles, have little chance of escaping the grip of poverty. It is as if the very coldness of winter mirrors the coldness of the social structure that values the rich and disregards the poor. The more you walk through these streets, the more you feel the weight of injustice, the harsh divide that separates the haves from the have-nots. As the bitter cold continues to tighten its grip on London, the city's heart begins to show signs of strain. With each passing day, the frigid air grows colder, and the streets, once bustling with life, become eerily quiet. The heavy fog that seems to perpetually blanket the city mutates into something more dangerous, something insidious. The cold is no longer just an inconvenience, sits a killer, silently taking lives, one after another. In the shadows of the city's grim realities, as you walk deeper into the overcrowded slums, you begin to notice the signs of winter's deadly toll. The poor are not just struggling to stay warm, they are dying, slowly, painfully, from the extreme cold and lack of adequate shelter. You can see the sick stumbling through the streets, their breaths coming out in visible clouds of steam, their bodies trembling from the chill that seems to pierce to the very bone. The elderly, frail, and weak are particularly vulnerable, their bodies unable to fend off the effects of the cold. You can see them shuffling, hunched and slow, their hands shaking uncontrollably as they try to make their way through the thick snow, but the bitter wind pushes them back in the workhouses. The atmosphere is stifling, thick with the heavy smell of sweat, dust, and illness. The walls of the building seem to press in on the residents, those who have sought shelter from the storm. But inside, the cold is just as pervasive. The heat is inadequate. Families huddle together on narrow, hard benches, trying to conserve their body heat, but the chill penetrates their bones. You can hear the coughing, the wheezing sounds that cut through the air with a kind of desperation, as bodies weakened by months of exposure begin to succumb to the flu or pneumonia. There is a growing sense of fear, of uncertainty, as the cold continues to take lives. The streets are littered with the remnants of the sick and the homeless men and women who never made it to the workhouses in time, or who simply couldn't find enough shelter from the cold. You feel the presence of their ghosts in the streets as the wind howls and the frost creeps in. Those who are lucky enough to survive another night count themselves among the fortunate. But the thought of the silent deaths that occur in the darkness is always hanging in the air. Even the churches, which are supposed to be sanctuaries for those in need, cannot escape the winter's grasp. The parishioners sit in their pews, stiff from the cold, the chill creeping through the cracks in the stone, mingling with the smell of incense and the silent prayers of those who hope for salvation. But salvation is not always near. The cold will not be driven away by prayer alone. And for those living on the streets or in the workhouses, there is no divine intervention, only the harsh reality of survival. You can feel the tension building as the death toll rises. The vulnerable are the first to succumb to the cold, while the rich remain sheltered, their lives untouched by the severity of the season. There's a certain irony in this, how the poor, who contribute so much to the city's life, are forced to suffer the most. The snow may blanket the city, but it also covers up the lives lost in the margins, the lives forgotten by the greater society. The winter reveals the fractures in the social structure, showing the stark inequalities that keep the rich insulated from the suffering of the poor. The cold is a reminder that while the wealthy can afford to escape the worst of it, the poor are left to face it head-on, without any help, without any escape in the streets. You see the faces of those who are still alive, those who are doing whatever they can to survive. Their faces are drawn tight with exhaustion. They move quickly, trying to escape the worst of the cold, hoping to make it to the next shelter, the next bite of food, the next moment of warmth. But the fear never leaves them. Each step they take is one step closer to the next cold night. The mothers holding their children tightly, the elderly leaning on walking sticks, and the workers trying to stay on their feet. They are all fighting against a world that feels indifferent, and against the relentless cold that is slowly claiming their lives as the final days of winter stretch on. You feel a faint shift in the air, a slight change, almost imperceptible at first. The harsh winds begin to soften, and the bitter cold that once seemed unrelenting starts to recede just slightly. The snow, which had once blanketed the city in white, now begins to melt away slowly, revealing the hard ground underneath. The streets, still slippery with ice, seem to breathe again as the frost loosens its grip, if only momentarily. There's a feeling of uncertainty in the air as the city begins to shift from the harshness of winter into the promise of spring. The cold that has defined every corner of life for months begins to retreat, but not without leaving its mark. The city itself is silent, and yet beneath that silence, you sense the resilience of the people who have survived the worst of it. For the rich, the return of spring is a time of renewal. They emerge from their heated homes, shaking off the chill of winter, ready to once again enjoy the comforts that the warmer months offer. They will soon gather in their gardens, indulging in the sights and sounds of nature. While the contrast between their lives and the lives of the poor continues to widen. But for the poor, the return of spring is not as simple as shedding coats and scarves. As the snow melts, it reveals the true state of the streets, the piles of refuse, the muddy water, the stench of decay left by the long months of neglect. The poor, those who have endured the bitter cold without relief, now face the aftermath of a winter that has taken more than their warmth. It has taken their health, their homes, and for some, their lives. The memory of their loss is imprinted on every corner of the city, visible in the shadows they now carry as you walk through the streets. The city seems to wake up, but not all its wounds have healed. The workhouses, still overcrowded and understaffed, become havens once again for those who have nowhere else to go. But the pain of winter lingers. The elderly, the sick, and the weak are still struggling to find a place in a city that has forgotten their struggles. They cling to whatever small comforts they can find, but the effects of the winter will stay with them, lingering like the chill in the air. The match girls, those young faces that you saw shivering in the streets, now return to their work, but their lives remain as precarious as ever. The winter months have left them scarred, both physically and emotionally. Many of them are weakened, their frail bodies having endured too much over the past few months. But even as the city starts to recover, they remain invisible, their struggles forgotten by those who can afford to forget. Yet, amid the bleakness, there is a quiet hope in the return of warmth. As the city thaws, the people who have endured the worst of winter begin to emerge from their shelters of renewal. It is not an instant transformation, but a gradual process of healing. The small triumphs of survival begin to build the foundation for the future. You begin to notice the subtle signs of life returning. The children, once bundled up in layers of clothing, now run freely in the streets, laughing and playing, their faces glowing with the joy of freedom. The marketplaces begin to buzz with activity, and the streets that were once empty with cold are now alive with movement. People who had been huddled together for warmth now walk side by side, their spirits lifted by the promise of warmer days ahead. For the poor, the return of spring is not just about the thawing of the weather, but the rebuilding of their lives. The scars of winter remain, but they are no longer the only thing the poor are left with. There is a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet but unwavering hope that of times have proven unbreakable. And as the city melts away the ice, the solidarity of the working class remains firm and steady. As you reflect on the change, you can feel the reawakening of the city around you. It is slow, but it is sure. The sense of the spring breeze, the sounds of laughter, and the soft warmth of the sun on your face are all reminders that life continues. No matter how cold, how harsh, or how painful the past season may have been, the people of London have survived the worst, and now they begin to rebuild. The memory of the winter's brutality will linger, but it will not define them. What will define them is their resilience, their ability to endure, and their hope for a better future. As the days grow longer and the chill of winter retreats into the distant past, you begin to notice the subtle changes in the city. The once dead streets, covered in snow and ice, are now slowly coming to life again. Felt as sharply, spring is coming, not in a sudden burst of warmth, but in the quiet promise that nature offers with each new day. It's in the first buds that begin to appear on the trees, the slight rise of the sun's warmth on your skin, and the gentle sound of birds returning to their nests. In the poorer districts of London, life is beginning to return to normal, but normal has a different meaning for those who have lived through the harshest winter, the poor who have endured the worst of the cold. There is a renewed energy in the air. The streets, though still filled with mud and dirt, are no longer filled with the quiet dread of winter. The people, although still living in poverty, are beginning to find hope in the arrival of warmer weather. The match girls, who spent so much of the past winter trying to survive in the freezing streets, are still selling their matches, but the sales are slower now. The streets are less crowded with people who are huddling in doorways for warmth, and more people are beginning to shop in the market for the first signs of spring. The smell of fresh bread fills the air, and the sounds of children playing in the streets echo through the neighborhood. Though their lives have not improved dramatically, the return of spring brings a sense of hope that was absent during the long, cold months. For those who still endure the struggles of workhouses and overcrowded housing, the weather may have thawed, but the social structures have not changed. The poor remain isolated, their lives still dictated by their social position. But for the first time in months, they feel a sense of renewal, a new energy that comes with the sunshine. The winter's brutality may have scarred them, but life continues, slowly but surely. Imagine yourself walking through these neighborhoods, watching the resilience of the poor. They may not have much, but they have each other. They gather together in the warmth of the spring sun, sharing what little they have, coming together to rebuild, not just physically, but emotionally. The community spirit that emerges after the long winter is stronger than ever. They share meals, laughter, and the knowledge that despite the hardships they have faced, they have survived together. It is this unity, this quiet strength, that defines them. The streets still have the marks of the hard winter, the broken windows, the rotting wood, the remnants of those who were lost, but there is also something new. The people are starting to see a new kind of hope. The death toll may have been high and the suffering immense, but the people of London refuse to let those challenges define them. As the spring rains fall, washing away the last traces of snow and ice, the city begins to feel like a place of renewal, of fresh starts. Children run through the streets once more, their laughter ringing in the air. Their faces, once weary from the cold, now glow with the warmth of the sun. And the elderly, who had once feared the cold and its toll on their bodies, now sit in the sun, breathing deeply, feeling the life return to their limbs. Spring is a time of hope for everyone in London, but it also serves as a reminder of the pain and loss that the city has endured. The divides between the rich and poor remain, but for the first time in months, there is a sense of shared experience, a tangible understanding that life must go on, no matter the hardships. The wealthy, though able to move on quickly from the pain of winter, cannot ignore the impact it has had on the city's spirit. And the poor, though still enduring the struggles of survival, find solace in the quiet strength of the communities they've built. As the first rays of spring warm the streets of London, the city seems to breathe a collective sigh of relief. But beneath the surface, hidden in the shadows of the still frozen corners, there are unseen scars, the mental and emotional toll that the brutal winter has left behind. You feel it in the subtle weariness of the people as they slowly adjust to the new season. Their bodies no longer wrapped in layers of thick wool, but instead beginning to shed the winter coats that had kept them protected from both the cold and the harsh realities of their lives. The chill has receded, but the trauma remains. The rich, in their grand homes and private gardens, have already begun to enjoy the beauty of spring. They walk the streets with ease, carrying with them no sign of the suffering that once defined the city. Their luxurious spring parties, their lavish lunches by the river, are a far cry from the hardships faced by the poor during the cold months. For the wealthy, the worst is behind them. They have weathered the storm, and now they bask in the comfort of their privilege. But the poorest citizens, those who had to fight to survive the cold, still carry the weight of what they endured. The workhouses remain crowded, the families that survived still struggling to find work or make up for the wages lost during the winter months. Children, once trapped inside to escape the snow and frost, now run freely through the streets, but even their laughter carries a sense of weariness. These are the children who lived through the longest, coldest nights, clinging to their families for warmth, surviving by the skin of their teeth. Now, even as the warmth returns, there's something different about their smiles. Something changed. The memory of what they endured is not something they can simply forget. As much as they might try to, there are stories in their eyes, stories that the cold has carved into their souls. For the elderly, the season's change is not just a recovery, but a reminder of how much they've lost. As they sit on benches under the newly budding trees, the warmth of the sun on their skin feels strange, almost foreign. Their bodies are slow to respond, still stiff from the months of suffering, the cold that had settled in their joints and muscles. While the world seems to come alive around them, they are reminded of the long, harsh winter, the bitter cold that left them exhausted, weary, and disillusioned, even as they sit under the shade. The city's renewal does not erase the reality of what they've been through. Winter's scars are still etched on their bodies in the worn expressions that greet the morning light. The elderly are often the first to fall victim to the cold, and for those who survive, healing does not come easily. The long nights of exposure have weakened them physically, and even as the weather turns, their health is still fragile, their bodies having never fully recovered from the winter's brutal grasp. The match girls to bear their own scars. Their small hands, once frozen stiff, are now red and swollen from months of striking matches and the rough treatment they received. They can still hear the crackling of the matches as they light them, but the warmth that they once sought from that brief spark now feels more like a reminder of what they've been through. The cold is not just a physical sensation, it is now a part of their psyche, something that lingers even when the weather improves. Every day they face the challenge of rebuilding their lives, trying to put together what they can from the shattered remnants of the harsh winter. But the process is slow, and every setback feels like a reminder of the winter's relentless power. As the snow begins to melt and the world slowly wakes up, you begin to realize that spring is not an immediate escape from the past. It's not a sudden release from the pain of winter. Instead, it's a process of slow, gradual healing that takes place layer by layer. The marks of winter are still visible in the street corners, in the faces of the people who walk by, and in the whispers that float on the breeze. The cold has left its mark on London, not just in the ruined buildings, the worn-out streets, or the frozen riverbanks, but in the very lives of those who endured it. But the people of London have always been resilient. They endure, they rebuild. The rich have their luxuries, yes, but the true spirit of the city lies in the strength of its people, the working class, the elderly, the match girls, and all those who have suffered yet continue to survive. Their survival is their legacy, a reminder of the strength of the human spirit, and their fight for a better future continues even when the winter is long gone. As the weather shifts and the days grow longer, the city of London begins to emerge from the shadow of winter, but the transformation is not as sudden as the melting snow. The resilience of the working class, those who fought to survive the brutal cold, still palpable, though often unnoticed by the wealthier residents of the city. Their strength, their determination to persevere, even when faced with the bleakest circumstances, has carried them through the darkest of times. The poor have not only survived the winter, they have learned from it. They have been changed by the experience, but they have also been empowered in ways that the winter's hardships have shaped into quiet yet unyielding strength. For those who had been forced to endure the cold, disease, and the loss of loved ones, this return of spring marks more than just the thawing of the land. It marks the return of their power, the power to rise, to rebuild, and to persist, no matter the challenges that life will continue to throw at them. As you walk through the streets of the working-class neighborhoods, you begin to notice the quiet defiance in the faces of the people who continue to go about their business. Even as the traces of winter's brutality are still evident, the peddlers and street vendors, who had once huddled under makeshift shelters during the coldest months, now stand tall, their stands brightly decorated with the first signs of spring, fresh fruits, vegetables, and flowers. Their presence is a testament to their survival, and each transaction, no matter how small, is a reminder of their resilience. The match girls, those who had once been reduced to selling their wares in the most desperate of conditions, now find themselves beginning to make a small living from their work, their hands no longer trembling from the cold. Their faces, though still etched with the traces of hardship, now show a glimmer of hope. They speak to each other in hushed tones, a quiet community formed in the midst of the cold, and they offer each other words of encouragement, their solidarity becoming their greatest strength. Despite the grief of the winter, they know that together they are stronger. As the season shifts these women and men continue their work. Their bodies, though still scarred by the past, now moving with a sense of purpose and pride. For many of them, the suffering they endured has become a badge of honor, a silent acknowledgement of their strength. The wealthy, who have moved on from the hardship of winter, fail to see the quiet strength of those who live day by day, who endure not for the comfort of luxury, but for the hope of a better life. The rich may return to their gardens, but the working-class citizens of London know that true growth comes from the roots of resilience, not from the surface-level comforts that wealth affords in the workhouses. The people who once languished in the cold now begin to find new purpose. Their eyes, though still tired and heavy with the memory of the suffering they've endured, are now filled with a renewed sense of determination. They continue to face long hours of work with wages that barely meet their needs, but there is something different in the way they carry themselves. The strength that has always been a part of the working class identity is now accentuated, and each small victory feels monumental. There is a sense that even in the face of constant adversity, these people will continue to endure and persist. The rich, once so far removed from the struggles of the poor, begin to feel the subtle shift in the air as well. They see the people around them changing. They notice the quiet determination that has emerged from the depths of hardship. The poorest citizens of London, despite the lack of resources, the lack of proper shelter, and the lack of support from the city's power structures, have found strength in each other. Their community has become their lifeline, and as they slowly move away from the devastation of winter, they rise not as individuals, but as a collective, stronger for having endured, as the city of London stretches into the softer light of spring. A sense of quiet renewal begins to settle over the streets. The snow has finally melted. The once dominating frost has been pushed away by the warmth of the sun, and slowly the city begins to breathe again. The streets, once filled with the muffled sound of shuffling footsteps and the oppressive stillness of winter, now hum with the rhythms of life, albeit more subdued, more cautious. It's a recovery that cannot be rushed. It's slow, like the thawing of the frozen earth, but it's happening in the poor neighborhoods, where the remnants of winter's brutality still linger, where the damaged homes, the scarred buildings, and the defeated faces are all that remain of the hardest months. Sense something different, something subtle. The city's poor have always been fighters, but the winter has taught them something invaluable: how to endure, not just through suffering, but with a quiet strength that speaks volumes. Now, as the streets begin to thaw, the match girls are finding new hope. Their small bodies are still fragile, their hands still scarred from months of holding matches in the cold. But they are beginning to find a small measure of peace in the warmer days. You can see it in the way they walk a little straighter, their eyes a little brighter as they look up from the cold cobblestones that have always been their path. The long, cold nights are still a part of them, but now they share their stories. They share what they have learned from the hardship, what has kept them going. They talk of resilience, of survival, and in their quiet words, you feel the strength of those who have outlasted the worst and found new meaning in their endurance. As the poor begin to rebuild, not just their homes, but their spirits, the city itself begins to feel more alive. You watch as children, once thin and pale from hunger, now begin to play in the streets again. Their laughter is fuller, their energy renewed by the warmth of the season. Their joy is something beautiful to witness after the long months of struggling to survive. Even though the scars of the past winter are still visible in the creaking bones of the city, there is a newness to it, a sense that life is returning, not just in the physical recovery of the environment, but in the rejuvenation of the people. The workhouses, too, are beginning to shift. Though the walls remain as worn as ever, the faces of those inside begin to show the early signs of renewal. People who once huddled in silence now share their stories, offer a quiet smile, or sit together in the sunlight that peeks through the cracks in the building. It is not a sudden transformation, but a gradual shift in the atmosphere. The poor are gathering again, but this time they do so with a sense of purpose. They help one another, care for one another, and slowly begin to rebuild their broken lives. The elderly, who have seen so many winters come and go, are particularly keen to feel the return of life. They are more fragile now, their bodies worn by age, but even they sense the shift not just in the weather, but in their own hearts. They sit in the parks, their faces turned toward the sun, basking in the warmth as they begin to feel the weight of winter's long grip loosen. They speak softly, recalling stories of winters past, but now, in the spring air, they also speak of the future, of the hope that continues to spring eternal despite the hardest of times. They, too, are rebuilding, not just their bodies, but their faith in life itself. The wealthy, who have long since retreated into their private homes and grand gardens, have begun to return to the city. They stroll through the parks, basking in the beauty of the blossoms and the scent of fresh greenery. But there is a stark contrast to their ease. The rich, while free to indulge in the pleasures of the season, are still moved by the silent strength of those who have endured. They begin to recognize the quiet resilience that has held the city together through its most difficult seasons. The vibrancy of the spring seems to awaken something in them, as well, a respect for the working class that had always gone unnoticed before. But despite their newfound awareness, the divide remains. The privilege of the rich allows them to enjoy spring as a luxury, a reward for the winter they easily escaped. For the poor, the return of warmth is a temporary respite, a break from the unrelenting cold. The scars left by the winter will remain, yet in the warmth, in the soft touch of sunlight, they begin to rebuild, to reclaim their lives. It's not easy, but in the heart of every working-class person lies the determination to continue. They are, after all, survivors. As the seasons slowly shift from the cold grip of winter to the gentle warmth of spring, there is a sense of change in the era, shift in energy that comes not just with the melting of snow, but with the slow, steady transformation of the people who have endured. Yet, even as the city begins to thaw, there is an undeniable resonance of the past winter, quiet echo that lingers in the shadows, felt but not always seen. The hearts of the city, once chilled to the core by the cold, are now filled with renewed hope, but they still carry the weight of what they've survived. The poor, those who endured the worst of winter's cruelty, are starting to rebuild their lives. They still carry with them the scarred memories of the cold months, but the gentle warmth of the spring offers them a chance to breathe again. You see them walking through the streets with slow, steady steps, their faces tired but determined. The winter's toll is visible in their eyes, the exhaustion of surviving such an unforgiving season. They have not forgotten the suffering, the loss, or the challenges they faced. But in the embrace of spring, they are given the opportunity to continue. You watch as children, once gaunt and pale from hunger, begin to fill the streets again, their laughter carrying through the air like a soft melody. Their spirits seem to be rejuvenated, and yet you can still see the deep marks left by the long, cold nights. Their faces may be bright with joy, but there is a subtle sadness in the lines of their eyes, a reminder that the cost of survival has etched itself into the deepest parts of their being. For these children, spring is not just about playing in the sun. It is about hope rekindled after months of silent suffering. The elderly, too, who have witnessed so many winters, now sit in the parks or by the riversides, their faces turned toward the soft warmth of the sun. They are more fragile, their bodies bent with age, but their hearts seem lighter as the light touches their skin. Still, even in their relief, you can see that their memories of winter have not completely faded. The suffering they endured, the cold that stole their strength, is not something they can easily forget. Their lives have become a testament to the quiet survival that many may never see. And yet, there's a sense of peace that comes with the return of warmth, a reassurance that even in their frailty, they can still find a moment of calm. As the days grow warmer, you also notice how the wealthy, those who were untouched by the winter's harshness, are more visible on the streets. They move with ease, their lives no longer hidden behind thick coats and foggy windows. They stroll through the flowering gardens, their faces glowing in the soft light, unaware of the lingering struggles that remain for the working class. To them, winter was little more than a fleeting inconvenience, temporary barrier to their comfort. They now walk with carefree steps, their thoughts far removed from the reality that the poor continue to face. But there is something different in the air this year. There is an unspoken understanding among the people, a quiet acknowledgement of the suffering that was endured by all. The contrast between the rich and the poor remains sharp, but there is a sense that the working class, those who have endured the worst of it, are no longer invisible. They have survived. They have overcome. Their strength is undeniable, and though their scars are still visible, they wear them with a kind of quiet dignity. The match girls, too, who have faced the harshest of winters, are still fighting for survival. But now, as the warmer months arrive, they seem to carry themselves with a bit more hope in their hearts. Their hands, once frozen and worn, begin to feel the soft touch of the sun. They too are starting to rebuild, slowly but surely. Their lives are still a struggle, but the power of resilience flows through them like the flowing river, steady and unyielding. The memories of winter remain, but they are now seen through the lens of survival, a reminder that no matter how hard the fight, the will to live endures. Even the workhouses, once filled with the despair of winter's cold, now see the faint stirrings of hope. The bodies may still be frail, the spirits may still be heavy with the past, but there is a new beginning in the air. The workers who once trudged through the bitter cold in search of food, shelter, or warmth now feel the first stirrings of change. The community they have built in the face of hardship is beginning to thrive again, albeit slowly. Their strength is what has carried them through. Together, they rebuild, one small piece at a time, as the days grow longer and the sun takes its place higher in the sky. the city of London begins to emerge from the shadow of the winter's harshness. Spring arrives not with a sudden burst of warmth, but with a quiet promise, a reminder that life continues. And even after the harshest seasons, there is a chance to begin anew. The streets of London, though still marked by the memories of suffering, now hum with a more hopeful rhythm. The heavy frost that once gripped the city begins to melt away, revealing the resilient people who have weathered the storm and continue to move forward. The working-class neighborhoods, still bearing the marks of the past winter, seem to come alive in the soft glow of spring's arrival. The air is fresher, the dirt of winter beginning to settle, and for the first time in months, the streets are no longer a battleground for survival, but a place of rebirth. The match girls, once huddling in doorways, their thin clothes barely protecting them from the elements, are now finding a new sense of purpose. The cold that once stole their energy no longer weighs them down. With the arrival of spring, they are not just surviving, they are starting to thrive. For the first time, you see them standing taller, their hands still tender, but no longer numb from the relentless chill. The scars left by winter may be visible in their worn faces, but there's a spark in their eyes, resilience and strength that they carry forward into each new day. As the sun casts its warm rays across the city, you notice the match girls offering more than just their wares. They offer hope. Their determination is no longer a quiet survival. It is a defiance, a refusal to be forgotten. They have survived, and in doing so, they have become the quiet heroes of the city. The elderly, too, find a new sense of peace in the return of spring. The weariness that marked their bodies during the long months of winter begins to melt away with the sunshine. Though their bodies are frail, their minds begin to clear, and the weight of the cold that once robbed them of comfort lifts from their shoulders. They sit in the parks or by the riverbanks, their tired hands resting on the worn wood of benches. But there's something in there, is a quiet satisfaction that no winter could erase. The world may have forgotten them, but in this moment, they know they are still alive, still a part of the beating heart of London. The rich, who have lived untouched by the sufferings of winter, continue to enjoy the luxury of spring with their grand parties and private gardens. They take their strolls through the flowering parks, their eyes blissfully unaware of the struggles that have been faced by those beneath them. Yet, as the city begins to breathe again, a subtle shift occurs. The wealthy elite begin to notice something they hadn't before: the quiet strength of the working class. The match girls, the elderly, the poor, all of them are surviving, and they do so not with the comforts that the rich enjoy, but with an unshakable spirit. The disparity between the rich and the poor is still stark, but as the city heals, so too does the realization that resilience is not defined by wealth, but by the strength to keep going. This chapter, as the frost retreats and the sunshine brings warmth to the city once again, symbolizes more than just the return of spring. It marks the resilience of the human spirit, those who have endured the longest, the hardest winters, and have come out on the other side with quiet strength. The poor, though scarred, are rebuilding, and their ability to move forward is a testament to the power of survival. The wealthy, while they continue to live in their insulated bubbles, now begin to see the real cost of their privilege, in money, but in the lives of those who survive despite the odds. The match girls, once the invisible fires for survival, are now seen by those who can help. Their struggles have not gone unnoticed, and the rich slowly begin to see that the true resilience lies not in the ease of wealth, but in the hard-won survival of those who live through the hardest times. The poor, the match girls, the elderly, of them have carried London through the darkest of months. Their lives, though not perfect, are marked by the quiet dignity of survival. And they continue to hold on to the hope that spring will bring not just the return of warmth, but the promise of change. As spring fully settles over the streets of London, the city awakens in ways that are both visible and subtle. The first flowers peek out from beneath the soil, their vibrant colors a striking contrast to the gray, icy remnants of winter that still linger in the corners of the streets. The city's architecture, weathered and tired from months of cold, begins to show small signs of renewal. Windows that had been sealed against the winter's chill are now flung open, allowing the warmth of the sun to pour into the rooms, bringing a sense of life back into the spaces once filled with darkness. The people to begin to emerge from the shadows cast by the winter months. The poor, who have borne the brunt of the city's harshest season, are finally able to lift their faces to the sun and breathe again. They still carry the scars of the winter in their bones. Their hands, though warm now, are still stiff from months of cold. Their faces, though bright with hope, hold the traces of exhaustion and loss. But they are also alive, and that is something that can never be taken away. As you walk through the streets, you see that the match girls, whose faces had once been filled with fear and hunger, now wear expressions of determination. Their hands, once trembling from the cold, now grip their wares with steadiness. They stand taller, their eyes no longer dimmed by the harshness of the world, but instead filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The survival they once fought for has now become a triumph of strength, of community, and of hope. The elderly, who spent the long winter months wrapped in layers of warmth, now venture out into the streets, their tired bones slowly finding relief in the sunlight. Though their bodies have been weathered by time and cold, they have lived through it. Their slow steps through the streets are not signs of frailty, but of wisdom and endurance. They have seen the cycles of seasons, the shifts between cold and warmth, and their faces, etched with the marks of age, now soften in the glow of the spring sun. They may be fragile, but they remain unbroken, a silent testimony to the power of resilience. The rich, who have been largely untouched by the hardships of the winter, now step out into the city's parks, ready to enjoy the fruits of privilege. Once again, they stroll along the flower-lined avenues, their gowns and suits gleaming under the sun, enjoying the pleasant weather without a thought for the struggle that many have endured. The contrasts between their comfort and the hardships of the poor remain sharp, but for the first time, there's a subtle shift. The working class, who have endured so much, are beginning to rise again. Their strength, their resilience, their unseen triumph are becoming apparent. And even the wealthier residents of London begin to notice in the quiet corners of the city. The workhouses begin to empty out, not because the poor have vanished, but because they are leaving, moving back into the streets, back into life, ready to begin again. Their faces, once worn with desperation, now carry determination. The heavy hands that once pulled at their collars in the cold now extend out with purpose. Spring has given them more than just warmth. It has given them the opportunity to rebuild, to reclaim what was lost in the darkest months of winter. The unity of the working class is palpable. Families who once huddled together for warmth now find the strength to move forward. There's a quiet power in their shared experience of power that will not be broken by the events of the past. The children who once huddled close to their mothers in the freezing cold are now running freely through the streets, their voices ringing with laughter. They play not just because the winter is over, but because they have survived the hardest season and found joy even in the darkest of times. For them, spring is not just about the warmth of the sun. It is about the freedom to live, to thrive, and to know that their lives matter, no matter how small or unnoticed they may seem. As the final traces of winter fade into the city's memory, there is a quiet reawakening in London. This is a city that has seen the worst of nature's power, but it has also seen the strength of its people. The working class may still be rebuilding, but the foundation they have laid is firm. The roots of their survival are embedded deep in the soil of London, and with each passing day, they continue to grow stronger, to move forward, to hope,